welcome everybody. Let's talk real estate. Your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current commercial real estate market here in Southern California. As we take a no BS look at both sides of the issues driving this market today to find the best solutions going forward. With our man in the middle, it's Barry Saywitz. Hey, Barry.
Hey, good morning, Paul, and good morning to all of our viewers and our listeners out there. I'm Barry Saywitz. It is Tuesday morning. We are back here talking real estate. We appreciate you tuning in and listening in. And before we get going, I want to do a mini shout out. We are past the Halloween holiday. We are on to the next. Everybody's getting ready for Thanksgiving, closing in on year end. So my Tony Robbins thought for the day is if you had any year-end goals that you started with at the beginning of the year, you're running out of time. You ought to get it together and try and finish it up and then try and make a new list. And as we do here every week, we try and give you some bits of pieces of information to take home with you. And I'm excited about today's show. So we're going to try and do the same thing. And I want to welcome our guest, John Combs, Executive Vice President of Lincoln Property Company, major real estate player based here in Orange County, California. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so great to see you again.
Yeah. So I appreciate you coming in. I thought what we do today is touch on a bunch of different stuff. You have a long history in real estate and with...
Does that mean I'm old?
No, just seasoned. It makes me old knowing all of the history of all the things that you've done as well. But we both kicked the can around for a little bit, and you've been involved with a variety of different companies going back to the 80s and then fast forwarding today with different players. I guess let's rewind. I want to start not totally at the beginning, but let's go back. 80s, Orange County real estate, boom time, really boom time everywhere, but Orange County really starting to really get developed and find its footing and all kinds of new and exciting projects. And you were in it at that time. What was it like during that period of time, and how did you get into real estate in the first place?
I have had an incredible career, and I love speaking of the highlights of it because there's a lot of lessons learned along the way with each change in my career path. And I was an equestrian, and as a very young age, I had a barn of show horses and very successful clients, and the most successful were real estate people. And I decided that instead of being the horse trainer, I wanted to have a horse trainer, which I do today. And I got into real estate. So I'm always about a half notch from being intelligent. And I got into property management instead of development. It, in the end, ended up just fine.
Good call, right?
But at the time, I probably could have made a lot of money quickly in the development game. And I remember I went to SMU in undergrad in real estate finance, and I remember there was a chart they showed of a broker and their income, and they overlaid it with the income of a property manager. And while the property manager started out with an income with a salary, and the broker at the time would get a draw, over time the broker's income was very uneven, but it clearly tiered up. The property manager's income was steady and lower.
Yes.
But we got to the same spot at the end on the chart. And I wanted to have a family, and I wanted to know where my income was coming from, so I picked property management, which turned out great in the end. I've had an incredible career in that industry. I know how to make money at it, and I know what it takes to be successful in that environment. But it clearly is different than if I had been a broker like you or a developer like you.
You say broker gets a draw. I remember when I started, I got zero. It was whatever I had in the bank, and then I got down to $50 or $100, and I was washing my own car and ironing my own shirts, waiting for a deal to close. And it's tough to pay the rent, and it's tough to have a family, and it's certainly an extra added level of stress. And then when you make a deal, you make a bunch of money, and you talk about it, and everything's all good. But when the market itself takes that turn, the property management really is the place to be, because the rest of the guys are scrambling or get weeded out.
Fear of failure is a great motivator.
Yeah.
I've learned that my whole career, and it sure has driven me when I started my own business as well, that fear of not making it and people saying what a terrible decision you made, and turning that into a great legacy company that I developed. So at any rate, so I'm one of the only people, in fact, I'm the only person I've ever met that had a property management class in college. And I did, and I got into that business. And at the time, in the 80s, there were very few college-educated professionals in property management. And so I shot way up quickly in a company that was called Vantage, a big developer nationally. And then when the market crashed, so did most of the development companies, including the Tremel Crows and the Lincolns and everyone else. And so I looked at similar risk and reward, and I really wanted to move to California. So it was a high risk to relocate, but if you're a property manager, they need them everywhere. So I was able to find a job very quickly with an industrial developer called John O'Donnell. That's where I met you years ago.
Yeah.
And I just copied things that worked in Texas because their cycle was quicker and deeper than California ever had, thank goodness. And I copied the ideas that the developers were using in a downturn, and it worked out here. And one of the lessons I've learned is you don't have to create new ideas. You can copy the ones that are really good if you're humble.
Yeah. It's best practices, right?
Yeah, it's a best practice. And so we turned John O'Donnell's development company, which was a premier industrial developer of 6 million feet of big box and throughout California and Alaska. We converted it into a third-party management company. We grew it to 24 million feet and sold it to Insignia. And Insignia at the time was the first public real estate company before CB or any of the others. And we sold it to them. John O'Donnell at the time did not want to have hundreds of people working for him. He wanted to stay nimble and small. He was scared someone was going to sign something he knew nothing about that was going to land him with a lawsuit. And so I was the only principal at O'Donnell that went with the buyer. But in that process, we had a CEO who was a year younger than me, and I got to be on the jet with him buying 36 companies in 6 years and amassed over 400 million square feet throughout the U.S. through acquisitions primarily.
The timing was ripe because the market, people were struggling. People didn't really know what to do. And then you also had these previous generation property owners that were looking for exit strategies. And then you had an aggressive company that was going around saying, hey, I got money, I'd like to buy it.
Yeah, and ironically, it's a similar situation today in that you have these regional property management companies where the principals, if their children like mine weren't coming into the business, it was not going to be a legacy company, and we had to look for exits. And so there's a lot of my peer group, similar in near retirement age, trying to figure out what do they do with these great companies with super clients and not harm their employees in the process to help them get to where they're at. So I learned a lot about M&A, learned a lot about motivations and fears of sellers. I learned about how you aggregate different cultures and people. It was fascinating to be a graduate of MBA applying what I've learned on the plane with a CEO who was absolutely insane, New York, Wall Street driven, and see all that come together.
And at the time, was there a fear of, hey, we're buying all these smaller companies that have totally different cultures in different parts of the country, and now we got to figure out how to make our own culture? Or was it a question of, look, let's just keep going with it and we're buying bulk?
This is why you're successful. You ask really incredible questions. That question is a great one. And what Insignia learned and what Lincoln has learned is that cultural compatibility is the key. You can't have one culture when you're buying a bunch of companies that have their own reputations and ways of doing things. You can create a culture that's compatible with one another. And I think that when Lincoln bought my firm, River Rock, 2.5 years ago, they didn't know that. I was their first acquisition. Ironically, when Insignia bought John O'Donnell's company, we were their first commercial acquisition. They had bought tons of multifamily companies. They were the largest multifamily manager in the country, but they had not bought commercial yet. So we were their first commercial acquisition. Very similar pattern of what I did when Lincoln sought me out to buy River Rock. They knew they needed to aggregate. They knew they needed to create a bulk size and an offering with someone who knew how to do institutional property management on a national platform. I had done all that. And they started with us. And since then, in just 2.5 years, we've bought 6 companies, 3 local, and we're one of the largest now in California, maybe second in size.
And so in concept,
in 2.5 years.
But in concept, you're doing the same thing you did decades ago.
That's right.
In terms of just the layering and the volume and getting to the mass so you can get economies of scale. And then the trick, it seems to me, along the way is you've got to integrate the people and you've got to keep it going, and then you can keep adding the building blocks on top of it. If you don't have your act together, with the base of what you have, it's very hard to just start throwing stuff on top of it.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of examples, which I find case studies really educational. When we started, it was going to be called River Rock Lincoln. I didn't care if it was River Rock Lincoln or Lincoln River Rock. And it was a mouthful to answer the phones.
Yeah.
And inevitably, clients and employees referred to Lincoln. So I said, why don't we just drop River Rock? As much as I love my brand and my label, and I've spent a fortune to create that brand awareness, let's just call it Lincoln. It's going to be Lincoln at some point anyway. And we did. And it was Lincoln really maybe day 30.
Huh.
But that was my idea. It wasn't Lincoln saying, oh, I want to put our brand on it. Today, Lincoln is buying companies, but they're leaving them alone. They're leaving the brands alone that they've bought, and they're letting those brands expand with the choice of expanding under the Lincoln brand or under their brand.
Yeah.
And it's a win-win.
And then you get to pitch, the company gets bought. It says, hey, I'm part of a bigger group. I've got much more depth behind me if that has value. And then at the same time, I still didn't lose my name or my local presence.
Yeah, if you're a financial company, an insurance company, and you're wanting to invest in joint ventures with Lincoln on development or acquisition, and you're really happy with the company that we bought, you're just going to see that many more deals being connected with Lincoln that you wouldn't have otherwise. So the clients are rallying behind this concept of leaving the brands that they're comfortable with, that they know, but everyone knows it's a Lincoln connection. And then the sellers of those companies work with Lincoln on where they want synergies. For example, I loved Lincoln's benefit program. My employees love their benefit program. They have so much more to offer in coverages, so much more affordable than a regional company could obtain in the insurance markets. We immediately went to the benefit plan as soon as possible. And I just had to sign up for the new benefits for next year. It's amazing how easy they've made it and how affordable it's become.
Well, that becomes your economies of scale, and then you're also blending people and a company that's on a national basis as opposed to somebody who's based in California where it's just more expensive to
Yeah,
operate
exactly. And on top of that, many times we combine our IT functions and the help desk and the availability 24/7 and the ability to not get hacked, the fears of all of that it's in place where the protections are there, the integration's there, the support's available. When I had it outsourced at River Rock, that we were really great in IT, but we weren't near as great as what we have today on scale. So that's the kinds of things that when Lincoln's out, they've invested and bought some really big names in California the past 2.5 years, and they're all they're still very successful. They're just expanding quicker because of the Lincoln combination now.
And I want to come back to that for a second, but I want to go back because in the Insignia game plan, it was go around and start buying people and get size. And then all of a sudden they wind up buying Edward S. Gordon, which at the time was the largest brokerage company, a commercial brokerage company in New York City, and also with a family who was looking for an exit strategy, and then parlayed on that to do the same thing in the property management, but then add the brokerage onto it as another aspect to the business that they were doing. And so that company really grew, and I think was a trendsetter in terms of then some of these larger national brokerage companies like a CBRE or like a Grubb & Ellis trying to figure out how do we compete and how do we grow, do the same thing, and take the model. And so the interesting thing is when the markets turn, there's really opportunities for the guy who's got deep pockets who's looking to grow because everybody's struggling.
The interesting thing about Edward S. Gordon, I'll tell you a funny story. Ed was a pilot, and he had a jet, and Ed was older, and he asked me to fly with him out to California. He wanted to tour some of our properties and meet with Donald Bren. And I was scared to death in this jet. One, I was glad there was a co-pilot in case he killed over and died. Flying the jet. But two, I'd never been in the cockpit of a jet, and there was a warning that came on, warning, plane in flight and path. I thought we were going to have an airplane crash, and he hadn't heard me because he kept flying straight. It was just to tell us that miles away there was another plane. But I had no idea. So we landed, and I said a little prayer that we thank you for letting us land safely. And we go to dinner, and he said, "You never complimented me on my flying." I said, "Compliment you?" I was praying.
Yeah. I was shaking.
I had no idea what was going on. That was a fun story. Edward S. Gordon was the brokerage firm in the New York tri-state area. If in the Encore affiliate program, 65% of all transfers of deals back and forth were from Edward S. Gordon to the Encore affiliates throughout the country. They had it down pat, and they called it managed brokerage. They controlled major transactions by having consultants, almost E&Y level consultants, tax people, specialists in incentives in government, and they would prepare and win the major assignments in the tri-state area and many times nationally.
And what would happen then, too, was, because I know that when I got into brokerage, you'd have an office in California, and they'd say, hey, everything's handled out of our corporate office in New York. And then you'd go to New York, and then they're like, yeah, we use these guys, that's it.
Yeah,
right?
we'll handle it.
And so then you had really the majority of major corporations headquartered in and around New York City. And so they had the opportunity where these people were in their backyard and they were working it, and then they take those relationships nationwide.
It scared me to death. Edward S. Gordon was the second acquisition commercial. And being a brokerage firm, we were very broker neutral on the West Coast, and we were managing all of Irvine Company's office and industrial portfolio, about 24 million feet. I had 160 people full-time just on Irvine Company's account. And I was scared to death that when they bought the brokerage firm, we would lose the assignment, the relationship, because of fear of their rent rolls getting shopped by
pissing
brokerages.
Somebody off, and then guys from New York with an attitude or whatever it was, right? Something would go awry.
So the day it got announced we closed, Steve Siegel, who was our CEO, was in my office to hold my hand and go see Irvine Company to reassure them. But we did the road show with the Insignia Edward S. Gordon brokers, in New York City. We had them all in a big hotel ballroom. And these are people that are making millions of dollars a year and have egos to match it.
Yep.
And I was the last speaker, being the property manager, to get up and talk about what we do and who we are. And they were bored. They were ready to get out of there. I said, I thought it'd be interesting if I told you what the press is saying about Insignia buying Edward S. Gordon. Would you be interested? Of course, everyone in the room wanted to know the story, and probably not good for my career. I said, the press is saying, did you hear that Insignia bought Edward S. Gordon? Who's Insignia? Everyone knew Edward S. Gordon. And I got a huge laugh. Our chairman was not very happy with me, but it was the truth. And it was really, no one at Insignia's relationships knew who we were, really. We were apartment management companies, and then we had a West Coast commercial practice.
Right. And then
so
all of a sudden
it went off, and we bought all these Encore affiliates that were doing tons of business with Edward S. Gordon, and it became a really important program. What changed? What was different between that Insignia, Edward S. Gordon, and the CBs and the JLs was our organizational structure. So I was president of U.S. Asset Services, so I had property management, accounting, construction, investor relations, and I had a co-president, Mitch Rudin, who came out of Edward S. Gordon, and he ran all of the brokerage and investment sales and hotel brokerage. And so the two of us were co-running everything. So a market leader, unlike today, you'd see at CB or these other locations, the market leader reported to both of us as presidents. That made it equal footing. In addition to that, it was all integrated so that when we went to do a pitch, you didn't meet the top broker on the pitch and the top manager on the pitch. They knew each other. It was an integrated family in the regions because that's how it was set up.
Yeah, and you still have to manage the ego of the individual broker in New York who's, look, just let me go do my deal. I just want I want to do my thing. I don't want somebody else tell me what to do. Whereas today, it's all about the team. If you look at CBRE, you've got teams of what could be 5 or 8 different people on a team, whereas back in the day, it was a me kind of mentality.
And a big influence was at Insignia, at Edward S. Gordon, you're talking about the client when you're pitching tenant rep. You're talking about the building when you're pitching agency leasing. You're not talking about the company.
Yeah.
And they took our proposals at Insignia that were all about Insignia, who no one cared about, and they converted them all into about the asset we were pitching or the team we were pitching. It changed everything. Our closure rates went way up after with their influence. They were really sophisticated, and they really brought a sophistication to Insignia, and that was really fun to be a part of.
Yeah, and it went on for a while, and so you rode that wave, and then, if I've got the chronology right, so then you decide to go out and do your own thing, or am I missing a step in there?
CB bought Insignia, and they didn't need two of us in my role, and they picked Jana Turner, who was their head of asset management at the time, a great friend of mine. She did an incredible job of integrating, and she created a matrix on how to figure out if CB had someone in Newport Beach and Insignia had someone in Newport Beach, who were they going to pick? They didn't need two. And she created this matrix, and out of 23 market leaders on my team, she picked 21 of them. One person I was going to fire, and she fired, and the other one was leaving to go do something different. Yeah. So I felt really wonderful that we had this team that ascended in a combined entity. And the people that she couldn't keep, they were redeployed. They weren't laid off. But it was just really great. And so she took over and did an incredible job. They did not lose one client. And they incentivized me properly in the exit, that I made sure that the transition went as smooth as possible.
And so after that, what do you do?
So then what do?
Golf, fish?
I hired Chris. I'm boring. I didn't have hobbies back then. I wasn't riding horses yet, again. And so I hired Chris Lee. Many of you might know CEL Associates. And Chris Lee sat me down in a hotel meeting room by LAX. He gave me 6 hours of his time. And we created 4 opportunities inside real estate and 4 opportunities outside that I would pursue. The very last one was going to start a property management company called River Rock. And that's the one I ended up with.
Interesting. And I've done those 6-hour meetings with Chris Lee at a hotel in LAX
He's amazing.
before. And so, he's one of the, I'll call him the Tony Robbins of commercial real estate, up there with Mike Lipsey in terms of forethought and then trying to get you to look at the big picture and drill it down to what your own personal goals are and try and make it happen. Small world.
We used Mike Lipsey for all of our training at Insignia. He was just incredible, and I miss seeing him. I've learned a lot from him. And the thing about each of them is they have different tenets on what makes success. And I remember that Chris Lee said you need 3 things to be successful. You need happy employees, happy clients, and a cash flow. And they're all super important.
Yeah.
Don't forget each of the 3. And it's actually really true in everything you do. And if you use those 3 in all decisions you make leading a company, I think it makes it so much easier.
And which gets back to the mantra of property management versus brokerage at the end of the day, because property management is, by definition, in my book, cash flow. Brokerage, you make a deal, you make a bunch of money. You don't make a deal, you don't make any money, right? And you're always looking at that next deal and can't really worry about the last deal because you got to go on to the next. Whereas property management is cash flow, it's operations, it's relation. Not that brokerage is not relationship, but it's relationship and keeping that relationship. And as your clients grow, you get to grow.
That's right. That's right.
So you start the River Rock, and then you're like, what? You wake up one day and be like, hey, I'm just going to do this?
I remember Jay Carnahan, who's a friend of mine who owns Orion, and he was a customer at the time, called me in, and he had an aerial of Orange County, and he said, there's 5 properties that are third party. Are you crazy? What are you doing? And they all have managers they're happy with. And it was such a defeat for me, my first day on the job, to see that, making that decision, committing my capital, and then realizing that it's going to be super, super tough.
Yeah.
And I had a non-compete, and I had an anti-rate of taking my teams for 6 months in the CB deal. So that meant I had to get business from someone I didn't have a relationship with and hire people that weren't working for me at the time. It was like a double whammy when you're bidding third-party new assignments. And so in a new company, my very first client came in. She represented Israeli money. And she said, we only do business with people whose name's on the door. Now, a lesson in life is you're always going to have obstacles. You always have to overcome objections to whatever you're in marketing. If you're a big company, you got to sell to the client that they're still going to be important, right? Yeah. If you're a small company, you got to sell you're not a house of cards and you're stable and they're a good choice for you. And you're not going to lose your eye off the ball. I never thought it would be about a name.
But you didn't tell them that your middle name was actually River Rock, or that
your
nickname
what I told
in college
them,
was River Rock?
And I don't know how I found the rabbit in the hat, but I pulled it out and I got the assignment. I said, I thought that I was going to be Combs Property Management, but I realized people wouldn't want to do business with Puff Daddy.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's also easier for people to find you and sue you when your name is on the door. I can speak to that from personal experience. So River Rock's, it's generic and it's better, I think.
River Rock was my horse investment company name that I just incorporated to be real estate too at the time. But it was an interesting name. And then suddenly you start seeing all kinds of names like BlackRock and Stone Point and all these names that are
earthy. Yeah.
They're like farms, and that I was lucky enough to have it in the beginning. So one of the things that's just looking back one more time on the Insignia Edward S. Gordon transaction and what they created nationally is they were really equalized in brokerage and asset services. And that was different than anything today. JLL started as an investment firm and an advisory firm. Then they had the construction component. And then they got into all kinds of brokerage and corporate services and took off. CB was always a brokerage company in the front seat.
First
Everything else was in the back seat. They've leveled it some, but it's still a brokerage company. Insignia was more balanced. And then when CB so much wanted to have that New York presence, and that's really why they wanted Insignia, they copied the managed brokerage model. They really did try to incorporate that. And they did an incredible job, I feel, and they did it globally.
Yeah, and they really, because in California, CB was it, right? I don't know what their percentage of market share was, but it was probably comparable to what Insignia or Edward S. Gordon was doing in New York. It was significant. And then with the combination of both coasts, they were, after that acquisition, the major player.
They and still are.
Yeah.
They are the leader and in size and depth and very difficult to compete against. And they have incredible deal flow, which is so key to third-party growth and property management. If you look at today,
let's fast forward. So today,
what's out there today is so different than back then.
Right. So what's the model today with what you have going on with the Lincoln? And is it to continue to grow the property management on a steady basis? Is it to get into more development deals and branch out? Or what's the game plan?
I think it's really evolving. And today the word grit keeps coming up with everybody. I think grit is what is going to make the new leaders of tomorrow. So what happened was, if you look out, you've got the big super real estate companies. They're probably pretty much done buying regional property managers. They're probably done buying brokerage firms. And now you see them buying construction companies and consulting companies and things that probably have higher margins that will supplement all those business lines. And so you see that in the CBs and the JLLs. And right. I don't think Cushman & Wakefield buys too much lately with their debt situation.
Remember Colliers did the same thing, basically, with buying their affiliates up.
That's right. So if you're a seller, you have these super big companies that have already pretty much aggregated in the third-party property management arena. And then you have Lincoln. And Lincoln doesn't really have competitors. They have private equity. They're wanting to bulk up in property management. And so they chose the West Coast first, even though we're based in Dallas, to create that new model and to buy those companies to create that fully integrated property company. And I think that brokerage is there, but it's not been the priority. Yeah. It's been getting the platforms in place with the kind of client list that you have that will help expand. So they've never had a national account program. That's what I'm involved with now, creating. Because they weren't national. They were like the Crow model, 36 profit centers, 36 partners.
Deal to deal.
36 websites, no CFO, no head of HR. And they brought the private equity in. They said, now it's time to grow up, Lincoln. And we had to grow up very fast. And our co-CEOs did an incredible job assembling new teams, bringing in, running it like one company. And they called it One Lincoln. Since then, we've bought, like I said, a bunch of different companies, although their names are out there and some people might not realize they're owned by Lincoln because the sellers are still involved. I was the first acquisition. I'm still here 2.5 years later. I chose to stay 3.5 more years. It's scary to me to see that fuse, Barry. I don't know if you have one, but when you see it's finite, it's very scary. Yeah. And I said, I have got to get some hobbies. I've got to become an interesting person again. so I'm able to do that. I've got show horses, and I'm taking golf lessons, and I'm on 2 nonprofit boards. I just left a United Way of Orange County nonprofit. I'm very interested in homelessness. They have a huge program with 211. They bought the 211 program in Orange County. And I got to tell you, with the food stamp situation, they had 40% increase in calls in the past 2 weeks on food, not housing.
I bet.
And it's fascinating how they've responded to that with the county. And I'm joined the Hoag Hospital Board, and I'm so excited. I start my first meetings Thursday night, but I'm so excited about what they're doing with AI and medicine and fascinated by it. And Hoag has enough of philanthropic efforts that they fund a lot of AI.
Yeah, and they're growing themselves, and so from a real estate footprint, they have
it's amazing.
Their own model.
It's amazing. And so anyway, what's interesting about, if you look out today, there's not that many buyers if you're a property management company or a brokerage company out there anymore.
Right.
And so what do these people that are my peer groups do? And what's typical in property management is they make a little bit of money. The margins aren't that great, but the money's going to the owner. And so the owner has to go away at some point for it to make money, to then get a return to be able to sell it, and it makes sense to someone. So it's been really fascinating watching Lincoln and their investment banking team put these deals together that are exciting for the clients, or exciting for the employees, and motivating enough for the seller to want to do a transaction. It's very scary to give up your company. It's frightening. These people that have worked so hard with you, your teams or your family, they got you to a point where you can do this, and you want to take care of them, which I've done my best to do as well.
Yeah. No, there's no question. And you have a challenging time with the economy, right? The office market's still struggling along if you're managing office properties, trying to keep them filled and keep tenants from not downsizing. And then on the industrial side, while the industrial segment has boomed, it's now cooled off a little bit. And it'll be interesting to see how the economy grows and or how it continues to struggle, and then what kind of pressure that puts on property owners, and then how that trickles down to the people that are managing their assets for them. You're always going to need a property management company, but the cycle of the market dictates sort of the activity flow and how that works.
Yeah, and I think that Park Miller runs our Orange County operation. He's runs everything in Orange County. He's doing just a phenomenal job in both development and in acquisition and in the property management arena. He's got some key new third-party assignments in Orange County that, you know, I don't know if River Rock had bid those, we would have won them. I don't even know if we would have been brought to the table the way some of these have transacted for Lincoln with their different activities. But Lincoln's heavily involved in retail. They are a major investor in Centennial, which does Bellaterra, does Soka. The major assignment, Santa Ana, the redevelopment of the Santa Ana Mall, where they're tearing down Nordstrom's and putting multifamily in. That's Centennial. They're very involved with Unihire, which is a 60 million square foot industrial developer manager acquirer in Orange County. They already did River Rock. So we're looking at over 100 million feet of third party before you count in Centennial. Right. And then on top of that, they invested in real estate marketing management, RIM, which is an apartment manager.
Yes.
They have 6,000 apartments in Orange County. We just invested in an LA firm that has 6,000 apartments. So overnight, we have 12,000 apartment units in the system.
So really into all different segments.
That's right. And they invested in TriGuild, which is a receiver, special servicer. So big loans that are defaulting, we're coming in as the manager if there's not a conflict.
Huh.
Otherwise, we're there as an advisor, hiring brokerage to sell them.
So really getting into all different facets, and then that's really the expansion going forward, as opposed to just trying to buy up a guy who's looking for an exit strategy. It's really no different than, I don't want to compare it to CB, but the CB model of other, I guess, profit streams and product lines.
Yeah, but here's the difference. Lincoln is a private company. Right. And when the founders, there were two founders, wanted to do planning, succession planning, they, with their 36 partners, agreed to do private equity with Stone Capital out of New Jersey. And so we have private equity money to do those transactions that the partners need to fulfill the markets and their business plans in those regions. So it enables Park Miller, for example, to do all these things that wouldn't be possible if it was just a partner on the West Coast with no no capital, right?
So
So you got CB Public, you've got Cushman Wakefield Public, you got Lincoln's private. They're already number 4 now in the country in portfolio size, and not done at all.
So I was going to say the short answer is nimble and active, continuing to look to grow.
Yeah, and when they chose Stone Capital, they wanted patient money, not typical PE
In
hot
and out,
money.
right.
And it's a longer term play, and that's what they were looking for. And it's been very stabilizing for the partners. And for example, we went to Las Vegas and bought the largest commercial manager brokerage firm in Las Vegas. So now Vegas really wasn't on the map, but the principal saw a video I did on the website about how happy I am as a seller and said, I want to talk to them. And he called them up off a video I did in the very beginning, which was all honest feedback as a seller, what I went through with Lincoln.
Yeah.
And so it's just been incredible for me personally, but also to see how everyone's winning out of it.
Good. Look, we could go all day talking about a variety of different stuff. Paul's waving at me. He's got lunch plans or something. But I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on the show, and it's exciting to hear that you are still active and still doing it right after all these years. You're looking good, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us, and much continued success to you and your family and your business, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
So appreciative. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks for coming in, John Combs, Lincoln Property Company. For those people out there who have nothing else to do on a Tuesday morning, we'll see you back here next week on Let's Talk Real Estate. I'm Barry Saywitz. Thanks for tuning in.
There you have it. You've been listening to Let's Talk Real Estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current state of the real commercial real estate market right here in Southern California. On Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studio here at the University of California Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.